bit after 5 o'clock. I appreciate you being here, and this is going to be an exciting afternoon for us. So ladies are here, and each time we do this, we seem to pick up some more people. I'm just tickled that you're telling your friends and neighbors and church people, you know, that we're doing this because the more people we drive in here to hear these stories and meet these people at the same time, you know, that you see what we're doing with the Historical Society. We've got a lot going on. We do have our board meeting at 4:30, and we have those around the table there. So that's what we were doing when you came in. And this month I've asked Jack Claiborne to come and speak to us because Jack is a celebrity. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. And I haven't talked to him in quite a while, but this afternoon, because you know I have all these articles from the years gone by when we interviewed people and put them in the paper and all that kind of stuff. And so this afternoon, I spent time reading the article that was done in the paper by Tanya Sierra, February 23rd or 14th, when they interviewed him. And it's a good story, you know, and this talks about being born in Dyersburg and going to school here and being drafted and being, you know, served. Then, if you watch the celebration of the 75th anniversary of the landing of D-Day in Normandy, and if you watched it, I watched it, I recorded it, because I'm looking for Jack. And there he sits, you know, and bless his heart, he had enough to think about what he's going to wear. He was the only one wearing white, which means you can pick him out easily. And of course, here comes the president of France down there shaking hands. Here comes Donald Trump shaking hands. And so when we talked about what he's going to do today, he could talk forever about a lot of things because he just got through talking about the years he worked with Albert at the mill. What did you say, Albert? First guy you worked with or something?
He's the first one I worked with.
First one, yeah. There's a story right there, but we're not going to tell that one today. Then if you read the article, you know, there's other things that he was involved with, and his life has been full. But what I've asked him to do is to talk about the trip that he took to an organization, as mentioned here, called Forever Young, that got him back to Normandy. I think you've been back like 3 times? Yeah. And so I've got him wired, so I think you'll be able to hear him. We are going to record it. Steve's doing that for me back there. And I got a response to my email from Kay Curry saying, Danny, I'm on vacation. I'm at the beach. I don't want to miss it. Would you record it? So I'm going to do that. We'll post it online. You can see it too. But before I hand it over to Jack, and I think he'll stay here quite a while, so if you have to get up and go because you got some other appointment, that's fine, but we'll stick around for as long as you want to. But let me mention that the Arts Council meets in here as well as the Historical Society, and they're putting on a play that will just knock your socks off in 2 weeks, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday afternoon at the Rhode Island Cumberland Presbyterian Church, which is the old church that's in excess of 100 years old out there. And it's called Smoke on the Mountain. Sean Dickerson, who just stood up, he's directing the play.
I knew exactly when to stand.
Yes, you did. And we have tickets here if you'd like some before you go. Feel free to see Sean or myself. And I want to also mention, too, our membership dues for the Historical Society is only $25 a year. And we go from the 1st of July to the end of June. So if you hadn't been a member, now's a good time to join. And if you are a member, now's the time to renew your membership. So we'd like to encourage you to do that as well. Edward Burks back there is our treasurer, and he'll be glad to take your cash check, or you might take a credit card on. But we'd like to have you participate with us. Now, before I introduce Jack, questions. Board, if I've got something I was going to tell people, I don't remember. All right. I learned something about Jack. He and I talked about this. I was in church the other day. This man walked up to me. And he said, my dad was in Nornamdy. I said, your dad? And I made no connection between Eddie Little, who goes to my church, and Jack Claiborne, until Eddie came up to me and told me that. So then I started paying attention, okay, and find out that, sure enough, you raised.
My stepchildren,
Yeah, he raised Eddie, and I'll tell you what,
about 4 years old.
you did well. He had a few bumps in the road, but I really like Eddie, and I appreciate what you've done for him. He's a fine Christian man.
Yes, thank you.
Well, without further ado, I do have the microphone on. If you can't hear or raise your hand, we'll try to adjust things. Please, let's welcome our County hero, Jack Claiborne.
How y'all doing? I look over the crowd, and I know most of you, but some of you, I hadn't seen you in long, or I know your face, but I can't call your name. But anyway, I'll start this thing with this. Let me tell you this. When I refer to a lady called Diane, she's Diane Hyde. She's the founder of this Forever Young Veteran, Senior Veterans Organization. And she's carried me to Normandy 3 times. And the first time was in 2011. And the second time was for the 70th anniversary in 2014. And of course this year was the 75th anniversary. And she's done so much good for the veterans, and she's carrying a bunch of veterans over in Bastogne in that next month. I forget the matter. But anyway, she's carrying them over there, and she's carried boys to Italy, Hawaii. She's trying to carry some men to Vietnam, but the Vietnam veterans don't want to go. They don't want to go back over there. But anyway, she carried me, like I said, 3 different times, and it's such a tiring trip. It's 9 days, and it's from 6 o'clock in the morning till late at night. And you're out meeting people, and those people are the most appreciative people in the world, and they want you to take pictures with you, and they want to take your autograph and everything, and they just want to talk to you. Some of them hug your neck. And but let me tell you this little story before I forget it. In 2014, when I was over there, this lady came running up to me, crying, hugging my neck, thanking me for saving her life. But she wasn't thanking me personally for saving her life. She was thanking me as an American for saving her life. And the story was, this little town of St. Mary-Eglise was where she lived, and she was a little Jewish girl. This was when the Germans was coming in to take over the town, and they knew that they was going to get all of the family, and they have all those houses over there have cellars, you know. And so the couple of the family that lived across the street loved this little girl. She was small. And they ran out in the street and got her, carried her down in their basement and hid her. And they kept that little child down in that basement for 5 or 6 years as long as the Germans were occupied France. And so and they took all of her family and killed them all in the concentration camp. And so she was liberated. The day that they were liberated, she got out of that thing for the first time. And so that's what she was thanking me for. And it was real touching. But then went on and these trips, like I said, we were doing something from daylight to dark, or past dark, and it was tiring. And so this last trip, in 2014, we always had, in the Memphis area, we had enough D-Day veterans to go. She tried to carry 14 every time we went. And we always managed to make that many. Well, in 2014, we had them all, and there was about 40 people. So we had That included the volunteers that went along as a doctor and a nurse, and they were all volunteers, and they paid their own money, and to take care of us. They pushed me all over Nornamdy in a wheelchair. Yes. And so, anyway, I was, this time was going, I told Diane, I said, Diane, I don't think I'm gonna go. You gotta go. You gotta go. And I said, well, it's awful tiring now, I'm getting to older. And she says, yeah, I says, Jack, since 2014, the last one, and they've all died except you. And so I was the only one that had been going, that was still living, and the Lord had blessed me, by the way. And so anyway, she told me, said, you just gotta go. And she did find two men that had never attended any of the meetings, and one had lived in Olive Branch, Mississippi, and one lived in Lakeland. And that made three from Memphis. Where we normally had 40 from Memphis to go. When we got ready to go, we went to 13. And so there was 3 veterans, D-Day veterans, and there's so not many of us left, and she started looking. She found one from the state of Washington, one from California, one from Las Vegas, one from Arizona, 4 from Alabama, 1 from Florida, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. And when we left Memphis, we flew into Atlanta, and all these people, they flew into Atlanta too. And we all met at the airport for the first time, and didn't know anything about any of them. But I tell you what, it didn't take us long to get bonded. By the time 9 days we was all together, we did like a bunch of brothers. And so we really enjoyed it, and I'm glad she made me go, but I'm still not over that trip yet. Well, we left Memphis on Sunday night, and then we flew to Atlanta, and at 10 o'clock we left Atlanta and flew all night long and got to Paris the next day at 1 o'clock. And of course we lost 7 hours in time changes. Excuse me. And then there was a bus waiting. We had to get on the bus, and we had to ride 4 hours out to Normandy. And the first 24 hours, the only sleep I got was what little sleep I got on that bus, on that airplane, and that wasn't much. But then the next day, for the next 8 days, they'd wake us up at 6 o'clock in the morning, eat breakfast, and we would get on that bus, and we were gone. And from that, sometimes we had to open up the restaurant was to eat in the hotel when we got back, and it was just tiresome. And then the day we left to come back home, we flew all day, and got to Memphis at 9:30 that night, and then I had drive to Dyford. It was about 11:30 when we got back. And I said, well, I'll enjoy my bed. When I went to bed, for the next week and a half, 2 weeks, I've had leg cramps, and I couldn't sleep hardly. And when she told me that I had to go, I told her I couldn't walk. She said, well, we'll put you all along in a wheelchair. And they did. I couldn't ask anybody in the world to be any better to me than they were. In fact, her husband is a pilot for FedEx, and he would come to my room with a wheelchair every morning and push me to the restaurant, and it was a buffet, and he wouldn't even let me serve myself breakfast. He'd push me up to a table and says, I'll get you breakfast. And I think I didn't get the exercise for the whole week, and I had to go along with my legs. But anyway, I'm finally getting better at it after about a month. But anyway, we got over there. Well, I'll skip this. ABC television network was doing the news, and David Muir did the world news, and he was over there doing his news from over there. And the Wednesday before we left on Sunday, a television producer from New York City for ABC who flew into Memphis came to my house with 2 cameras. And he stayed at my house till 10 o'clock at night taking pictures. And I don't know what that called, pictures, I've seen 3 or 4 of them. But anyway, then this producer couldn't go with his buddy did, and he stayed on that bus with us the whole trip and taking pictures and stuff. And then David Muir had a thing every night, and he was a fine man. I really do like him. I didn't know him before that, but it was so many things. It was just really wonderful, and I really enjoyed it. And then we went on up the day of the big celebration, and went up there, and this place was so crowded, and the security was so tough. They had the President Trump and the President of France and their wife there, and they would just everything. And I had to go through a thing, and they checked me and everything, and they gave me a thing I put around my neck. Without this, you couldn't go nowhere in there. And so then after they talked to these people, they put a little cloth band on my arm, and they fixed it so tight that you couldn't get it off unless you cut it off. It was cloth. It would go, and so you couldn't take it off unless somebody else had it. And they did my wife the same way, and they wouldn't let her sit with me. She sat about 5 or 6 or 7 rows behind me, up in the same section. But anyway, then I got this is an official ticket to sit where I was sitting, and on the back side of it was an invitation from President Trump to sit in my seat. I got to my seat. They had my name on the back of that seat. They misspelled my name, but that was me. But anyway, this is the program for the day, and I got to shake President Trump's hand, and that was an honor. And I didn't get to shake his wife's hand, but I did get to shake the President of France's wife, but I didn't know who she was at the time when she came up there. But I didn't get close enough to him to shake his hand, but I eventually saw her go over and sit with him, so I knew it was his wife. But it was a good day, and we just had a lot of fun, and meeting all those extra veterans. It was just made my day, and so anyway, we got through with that, and then we went to David Muir carried us over into this American cemetery. It's up on the bluff at Omaha Beach. This cemetery was built about 12 years after the war, and they moved all these bodies that had been killed. It was, in fact, there was 4,000 boys killed that day at D-Day where I was. And so Lord was with me again. But anyway, he carried us out there, and he interviewed us, and he did so much, and he's supposed to be making us all do video of all of these films that we made. And so anyway, then we went on around different places every day, and And I'll tell you this little story. This is unusual too. This 2014, Michael Reagan, President Reagan's son, is the head of the Reagan Foundation, and he built it. He has built it now. Airport Museum in this little town in St. Mary, Louis, and he wanted a video of D-Day veterans to show in this thing, in this museum. And so he asked me and three more boys from Memphis, would we be in it? And I told him I would. And so I forgot about it. About 2 months later, they called me. A man called me from California and said, well, they got what I need them in Memphis. And so I told them yes. And so they filmed me, and so they made the documentary. And so this is it. And I'm going to let them have it and make a copy of it. And Michael appreciated it, and so he, in this museum he built, he's built a walkway, and he got bricks out there, and this was a complete surprise to me. I didn't know it until I got it, and he sent it to me. He put me a brick out there in that walkway, and he sent me a paperweight, and it's got what he's written on that brick. And by the way, I found my brick over there when I was over there the other day. And I'm real proud that the brick it was next to mine was Theodore Roosevelt Jr.'s. Of course, his was about 3 or 4 times bigger than mine. But he was won the Congressional Medal of Honor D-Day. And he went in on the beach with his troops. And he wasn't killed, but he about 6 weeks later, he had a heart attack up in Belgium, but he wanted to be buried with his men. And he buried in that cemetery. And the first grave you come to when you come out the door. And his brother is buried beside of it. Now, I don't know the story about the brother and how he got there. But anyway, he sent me this thing here, and I was real proud of it. And let me ask y'all something. I got it. Did any of y'all, I think you did, remember Dave Bullington? Did any of you remember him? But anyway, he had a brick about 3 or 4 of mine in Shelbyville, Tennessee. He was in the 555, 82nd Airborne Division, and he got a brick. But I think Dave, he used to live on Payne Avenue many years ago, and but I think Dave did now, but I wrote it down. And anyway, while I was at this museum, this is unusual too, that this could happen. But in 2014, how long y'all want me to talk?
Keep going.
In 2014, I was over there, and these people were so appreciative of me. And they'll come up to you, and they won't take a picture of you. They want to hug you, and they want an autograph. And especially if they've got kids, they want your kid with you and take a picture. But anyway, this man walked up to me. This was 5 years ago, in 2014. He said, "Mister, can I take your picture?" And I said, "Yes, sir." "Sure can." And he spoke good English. And there was so many people over in the United States, when they could speak good English like that, I asked him where they were from. And I asked him where he was from, and he said, "I'm from Congo." And so he started taking a picture, and this was our ID card. And he saw that, and he says, what is that? Who is that?" And I said, "Well, that was me when I was at Nornamdy. I was 19 years old." He says, can I take a picture of that? I said, yeah. So I held it up, just like I'm holding it up now. He took a picture of it. The other day, when I was over there at this museum this time, 3 men came up to me and they said, Mister, will you photograph a picture of me? And I said, I sure will. And this was 5 years later. He had enlarged this picture, and it was about a 6 by 8, and it was him. He had that picture, and he wanted me to autograph it, and the other 2 men had one too. 5 years later, and he found me in all those people. So happened that we were there at the same time 5 years ago, and was there five years later. And
Jack, if you will, talk a little bit about your experience.
I can't hear you.
Talk a little bit about your experience during D-Day at Omaha Beach.
You want to hear about that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I started, we left Wayne things, and you know, the D-Day was supposed to have been June the 5th instead of the 6th, and it came up a storm, and there was a bad storm, and Eisenhower put it off a day, and he couldn't put it off long, because if he'd put it off another day, he'd had to wait about 3 months before conditions would be right again, tides and all, and the tide rose and fell about 25 feet up there, over there, and so anyway, we went on and we made the invasion during the storm, and so we had went in. I was on an LCI, it's a landing craft infantry. We didn't man nothing but people. I mean, infantry. And so it was pointed out, both smallest seagoing vessel in the Navy, but that, I mean, we crossed the ocean under our own power. It was 158 feet long and 23 feet wide. My fishing boat on River Lake was 18 feet long, so it's 5 feet wider than that boat was, my fishing boat was. It took us 21 days to cross the Atlantic, but anyway, this man was appointed to be the port commander over there. He was a commander in the Navy, and he was to direct traffic, to tell people when they could bring boats in to unload and all. And so he picked our ship. Our ship was a shallow draft boat, and when we crossed the ocean, it was loaded and everything. It drew about 12 feet of water at the bow, at the stern, and about 5.5 feet at the bow, just flat bottom. And so when we were in a landing mode, it drew 6 feet of water at the stern and about 1.5 to 2 feet of water at the bow. So we could run in real shallow water, and we just running up and down. But we had 202 troops on our ship, and we landed those and unloaded them at 7:30 that morning at Omaha Beach. But he wouldn't go with us as commander with me. Had to leave him out of this Anton, the troop transport out there, and had to go back and get him. But we did land one time, and that was to unload our original 202 troops that we had aboard. And so then we went and picked him up, and then he directed traffic. Well, starting about, the Navy started bringing in old Liberty ships that had to have a port, because the English Channel is always rough. And so we had to have some kind of breakwater. And so they brought in four Liberty ships, and there was one old English battleship that was built in 1897 that they had been using for target practice for years, the Navy had. And so they pulled all of them over there, and they wound them up out of the stern and blew the bottom out of them and made a wonderful breakwater, made a fine port. And then they were doing fine, and then about 15, 16 days after D-Day, it come the biggest storm that had been on the English Channel in over 100 years. And it tore up all of that stuff. So they couldn't get in and land because all of the other ships that was torn up and all. And so by noon D-Day, and the Corps engineers and Navy Seabees come in with their bulldozers and went up on that bluff. Omaha Beach was the beach, and then it wasn't very long before you hit a bluff, big island. And so up on top of that bluff, they came in and they carried the bulldozers and things up on top of that bluff and started working. And by noon the next day, they was landing C-47 transport planes there. And they was bringing supplies in from England, and they were taking dead and wounded back to England. And if it hadn't been for those airplanes bringing in those supplies, we'd have lost Omaha Beach. Because we couldn't have gotten those supplies in. And they saved us. And so then I never had seen anything about it where they got any credit at all for doing that, the engineers and Seabees. But anyway, they did all of that, and then there was different things. I'll tell you a little story about this thing. In 2011, when I first went over there, they was carrying us around this cemetery, and so this man, he was an American. He was the head of this cemetery. And I was lucky enough that when they played the national anthem, I got to put the wreath on mine. But anyway, he was showing us around, and there was a little road right up on top of this bluff, and he was out there, and he stopped, and he said, "I want y'all to look down there on the beach and see that clump of trees down there." Said that was a big German emplacement there, a big cannon in it. And I asked him, I said, "Could I ask you a question?" And he said, "Yes." And he said, I said, "Which way was that gun shooting out there?" They didn't shoot right out toward the water because the ships out there, there were 5,000 ships out there, they could shoot right into it. The Germans had a great big flange on that thing, and that gun would shoot down the beach, and that down there would shoot up the beach, and that way they couldn't be shot into. And he looked at me kind of funny when I asked him which way it was shooting, and he finally told me that it was shooting this way. And I had been looking for this huge one. It was down there D-Day. And it had a big German 88 in it. And it they could go out of the back of it, the Germans could. And it was a big ditch about 10, 12 feet deep, and it was concreted, and they could run up through there and then go back into that bank, and they had their quarters back in that bank. And they could run all over the place and you couldn't see them. It wasn't above ground. But then, it's so hard to get up and down this bank at Omaha Beach. The tourists are not going down there. So they're tearing down a lot of German emplacements, and they had torn down this big one that I was talking about. And I asked him when he told me that gun was shooting that way, I said, "Can I ask you another question?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, where's the big gun?" It was right down there. He looked at me kind of funny, and he said, "How you know there was a big one down there?" I said, "Mister, I was here." And so I knew it was there. He said, "Well, they tore it down." And then I also asked him, I said, "Can I ask you another question?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, well, where is that airstrip? They built up here on top of his bluff. And he said, you remember that? I said, I sure do. And he said, you got a good memory. And he told me, he says, that clump of trees down there, says, that's where the airstrip there, and it's still left. He said, if you'd like to see it, said, I'll carry you down there. And I said, no, I can't walk. And so he said that there was an airplane that was flying in there. There was 2 nurses that was on those airplanes. It was carried wounded back to England and got killed. And there's only 2 women that is buried in that big cemetery. And there's 9,845 graves in there. And so he went on and he came to me later after it was all over with and told me he appreciated me asking those questions. But anyway, that was that. And this, I'll never tell you about this picture. This picture, I was 19. When I got home on the 20th of December of 1944. And I asked my mother, I said, what do you want me to get you for Christmas? And she said, I want you to have me a picture made. And I went up to the old Rice studio, and I'm sure a lot of you people remember that. And I asked Ms. Rice, she was still living at that time, could she make me a picture for my mother for Christmas? And she said, yes, this is the picture that she made. And, but anyway, I enjoy talking with you, and I can tell you a lot more stuff at this stuff all about.
Jeff, let me ask you a question. Where was the Rice studio?
Where was it? It was right over Louis Jewelry Store. If you remember where that was on the north side of the square?
Yes.
It was right upstairs, or right over there.
We have the Rice studio camera over here. That wouldn't be the camera she took your picture with, would it?
May have been. May have been.
I don't know.
But it was,
What questions do you have?
I'm just curious, when all this was over, how did you get home?
well, and after this commander, like I said, he was directing traffic, and he did. We stayed on that for 50-something days on the beach, just running up and down the beach with him, and he had six signalmen and 7 radiomen on there, and so then when they finally took the port of Cherbourg, France, that opened up a port for them, and they went up there to there, and so that turned us loose. And so anyway, then we started escorting these LCTs, which was just a motorized barge, going about 3 miles an hour, back across to England and back to get supply. And we made 40-something like that trips back and forth to England. And then in October of that year, 44, we went up to Edinburgh, Scotland, and turned our ship over to the English Navy under the Lend-Lease bill. Then we caught a train and went down to Plymouth, England, got on a troop transport, and came home. And up to Pier 92 in New York, which I was at several different times, at different occasions. And but then they gave us the 30-day leave, and I got home the 20th of December. And so then I went back, and then they put me on, went back to Pier 92, on leave, and all of our crew was split up. And so they put me on another crew of LSC on 444. They're building it over Bayonne, New Jersey. And so we were fixing to go and invade the homeland of Japan. And they needed that boat real quick. And so usually they would let you have what they call a shakedown cruise, get so many hours on the engines and all before the Navy would accept it. And so they didn't have time to do that, so we took our hours and going down close to the Panama Canal and was over in the Pacific. And anyway, we stopped in Tampa, Florida as we went down, and this LSM was very similar to an LST. That was a big landing craft, had the doors open and the tanks and all. Now it had a top deck on it, but this LSM didn't have that. It was open deck. But they needed a very big propeller for a huge ship, and we was going to carry it to the San Diego Naval Base in San Diego, California. Where they was going to put it on that ship, and they wouldn't go down in that thing, so it stood up 10, 15 feet out there. It was so big out on the top of the thing, and we stayed in the east end side of the Panama Canal for a week, and just going out running every day. And then we went in going through the canal and over on the west side. And we were finally left there. We went away, made a big circle. We went out and tried to do in hours, just getting time on those engines, and we finally went back into San Diego. And I had a blackout, and they didn't know what was wrong with me. And they carried me to the Long Beach Naval Hospital, and it was a huge hospital. And anyway, they was running tests on me, and while I was there, they was taking people out of the hospital. They were expecting over 1 million casualties in Japan, and they was clearing space out of there. And I asked the doctor, I said, how long am I going to be in here? And he said, well, till we find out what's wrong with you. And I said, well, they're clearing this out. I said, I'm going to be in here a while. I'd like to be transferred to Bennington Naval Base. And he's going to put in for a transfer. And I put in for a transfer and it went through. And so, while I was still there, before that all happened, President Truman dropped those 2 bombs. And my ship had already left me and was on the way to Japan. And of course, when the war ended after they dropped those 2 bombs, they went around and sent them into Hawaii. But that's what happened to me after that.
And can you recall where you were when you heard it? Can you recall where you were, what you were doing when you first heard that the United States had entered war with Japan? And talk about your naval training. Where did you go? Where did you do your naval training?
Yeah, well, this is of course, it's true. I was drafted out of high school, and so I didn't. This is a roundabout way to answer your question. I didn't graduate from high school, and then when I came back home, I wanted to go back to school where I could go to college. Didn't like all that much, and well, the father was a football coach. What's your name, Alan? He was football coach.
Christian.
Yeah, Christian.
Coach Christian.
His last name was Christian.
He was football coach, and then he was principal when I came back.
Morgan Christian.
Morgan Christian.
Morgan Christian. Same thing with me. But anyway, I went up there to see him, and he told me, said, Jack, I'm glad you're home. Glad you made it. He said, what can I do for you? And I said, Coach, I feel for you, Coach. I said, Coach, I want to go back to school. He said, well, I hate to tell you this, but you're not going to come back to my school. And I said, well, I don't like what. He says, you're too old. I had just turned 21, and he wouldn't let me go back to school, so I got a course with the American Correspondence School in Chicago and finished it up, and then I went to work at the post office. But anyway, getting back to what he's talking about, I was inducted at Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, and they swore me in at the post office in Chattanooga. And they put me on a bus, and we got up to Bainbridge, Maryland, where I was going to be in boot camp. The first fellow that I saw, there was a bank there where the bus stopped, and there was a sailor standing up on the bank. He heard it was from Dyersburg, and he met me. And I don't know whether y'all ever remembered him or not. His name was Bill Charlie. Bill Charlie, he had, you know, Leon Cummings. He was Bill Charlie's son-in-law, Leon. But anyway, and Leon was there to greet us, and I enjoyed seeing him. I went to school with him years ago. But anyway, I was at Bainbridge, Maryland, and then I went to, after that, they put me down and sent me down to a little place, Middle Creek, Virginia, which was right out of Norfolk, and it was so primitive. They had, it was in a swamp down there. It was an amphibious place that they were making, and we had to sleep in tents, and had outdoor toilet things, and everything was mud, and they had these pallets, wooden pallets down a walkway where you could walk on, and took that training down there, and it worked, I guess. But anyway, that's where my training was.
You remember Pearl Harbor?
Yes, sir.
Where were you when that happened?
All right, this is funny too. I was a young boy, and it was on a Sunday, of course. We had a huge snow that day. I was working out the hut, pumping cars and washing dishes. On Sunday and on the weekend, I was working out there for Jim and Newman. And so this particular day, Pearl Harbor Day, the snow was so bad, there was no traffic. There was nobody coming in, but Jimmy would let you sit down and do nothing, so he had us all working. He had a big soup display, cans all the way up to the ceiling, and he had a pitcher that plugged in, and somebody wanted a can of soup, just dump it in there and plug it in, and it heated up. Well, that pit, barbecue pit, opened up inside the building, and every time they'd open it, smoke would come in there, and all of these cans of soup up there was greasy. And I was up on that counter with it on my knees, with a bucket of water and soap water, and I was washing these cans, watching them get the grease off of them. And the radio was right down below me, and it came on about Pearl Harbor. Didn't nobody know where Pearl Harbor was. But that's where I was, Pearl Harbor.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
About how long were you actually in the heat of combat from D-Day until how much later? Pretty much.
Well, I stayed.
Light combat.
I was, but actually, the fighting had done moved in, but I stayed there on that beach for 57 days. I was on the ship, but I'm saying on the beach, just right on the beach, and 57 days after D-Day, and of course the fighting had moved on. But we was under air raid, German air raid all night, every night. And let me tell you this, before, we was over in England before D-Day, about 3 or 4 days before, they found the general quarters one late one afternoon. It didn't get dark over there until about 11 o'clock at night. Well, and so they found the general quarters. Now, when we were at sea running, I was a helmsman on board it, and I steered the ship. And from this general quarters, we had 5 20-millimeter anti-aircraft guns on it, and I was a gunner on one of those anti-aircraft guns. But anyway, they sounded general quarters, and they told us, we're gonna have a flyby here in a minute. I want you to look at every one of these airplanes. Look at them good. And so when they flew over, every Allied airplane, British and all, had on their wings, they had three white stripes and 3 black stripes on each wing and around the fuselage in front of the tail. And they told us when we get over there, if they were going to quit flying at dark, and anything that didn't have, the Germans that got some of our planes and they shot them down and took the pieces and made some that was flying some American planes. And so they didn't want us to get bombed for one of them for one of them. And so anything that didn't have those stripes on them, we shot at. And they would quit flying at sundown, at dark, and then we shot at everything come by there. And you had saw the fireworks the other night. I've never seen fireworks as big in my life as there when we was in those air raids. There's over 5,000 ships out there shooting, and those didn't have those big searchlights in it. So one of those searchlights ever got one of the German planes in it. They'd all pick him up, and he was a dead duck, but somebody was going to hit him. And so it was just all those ships shooting those tracers, and just made the most beautiful fireworks that you ever saw. But then now my little old gun, 20mm, it was the only gun that when you shot it, the bullet exploded on contact. And the others, 40mm and above, they all exploded up in the air, creating flak. And so there were so many ships out there, and there were so many 40mm guns shooting. The bullets were going up and coming down and falling on the ships and injuring our own people. So they stopped us from shooting those. So I never did get to shoot more after that. And so that's where that was.
Other questions? I appreciate you coming today. Don't forget you need to join us. We have tickets to see the play, Smoke on the Mountain. We're going to stick around for a little while. We're going to talk to Jack. Welcome to do that. But let's honor him by telling him thanks for his service.
My friend Bob Kirk there, Wyatt, took the pictures off the television, and old Bob right there. He carried them out to Walgreens and had pictures made there. And I've got a white thing on. It was cold over there. It was 52 degrees. The wind was blowing about 30 miles an hour, and the lady come up there and wrapped me up with that white coat. And my dad read the Trump and all these pictures, and Bob had them made for me. And I really appreciate it, Bob.
Thank you again.